We are working on these Task 1 academic tables from Cambridge IELTS Book 20. We'll divide this video in 4 parts: understanding the question, planning the answer, vocabulary needed, and finally a full sample answer. There are 3 tables here showing the population of New York City and its 5 districts. New York City has 5 districts: Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and the Bronx. The first table shows the total population of New York City in 3 different years. The second table focuses on one district, Manhattan. The third table combines the other 4 districts together. So, all 3 tables show population numbers. Table 1 is separate because it shows the total population. Tables 2 and 3 are parts of this total. If we add the population figures from tables 2 and 3, we get the number shown in table 1. Tables 2 and 3 have one more column. They show what percentage of the total population lives in each part. To understand this more easily, imagine the total population of New York City in 1800 is 100. Out of these 100 people, 76 lived in Manhattan and 24 lived in the other 4 districts. Now we plan before we write. Here we decide what to write and the overall idea. When we write the overview or overall first, but during planning, we need to understand the data first. At this stage, we do not need exact numbers. We also do not need vocabulary yet. First, we look at the population numbers. The total population increases over time. That's the first point. In Manhattan, the population goes up first and then goes down. That is the second point. And in the other 4 districts, the population goes up a lot, especially between 1900 and 2000. Now we look at percentages. The percentage in Manhattan goes down over time. The percentage in other districts goes up. From this, we get the overall picture. Overall, population increases. There is only one decrease in Manhattan between 1900 and 2000. There is also a clear change. In 1800, most people lived in Manhattan. By 2000, most people lived in the other districts. Now let's look at vocabulary. We start with trend vocabulary. In graphs and tables, we often describe trends like increase, decrease, or fluctuation. In these tables, we mainly need increase and decrease. Instead of repeating increase, we can say go up, rise, and grow. For decrease, we can say go down, fall, drop. We can add words to show how big the change is. If the change is big, we can say sharply, dramatically, substantially. If the change is small, we can say slightly or marginally. Before we move on, let's look at a couple of example sentences. Remember, variety is not only about using different words. We can also create variety by changing the sentence structure. The first 2 sentences mean the same thing, and the second 2 sentences also mean the same thing. But we have changed the word form and the sentence structure to create variety. Sometimes, for a very big change, we can use strong words, but we need to use them carefully. Skyrocket and spike mean increase sharply, and plummet means decrease sharply. In this question, we can use these when talking about the population of other districts between 1900 and 2000. The population of the other districts skyrocketed between 1900 and 2000. However, the percentage for Manhattan has decreased a lot. So we can say that the percentage in Manhattan plummeted. Here are different sentence structures we can use to describe increase and decrease. Notice that the meaning stays the same but the structure changes. Sometimes we start the sentence with the population or the figure, or we can start with the change using there was. So, there was an increase in the population. We can also use phrases like experienced an increase. Instead of saying the population increased, we can say the population experienced an increase. Or we can write growth was recorded or an increase was recorded in the population. We use different structures only to avoid repetition. You don't need to know all of them. Just pick one or two structures that you're comfortable with and use them correctly. When we talk about overall increase or decrease in a table or graph, we can use trend with upward or downward. For example, the overall population trend in New York City was upward. But the overall percentage of total population showed a downward trend. We can use the word shift for a major change. We use shift when one group becomes less important and another becomes more important over time. For example, in this question, population percentages are changing. So we can use the phrase demographic shift or shift in population. For example, there was a shift in population from Manhattan to the other districts, or the data shows a clear demographic shift from Manhattan to the other districts over time. Similarly, in other questions, we can use phrases like a shift in market share, a shift in expenditure habits, or a shift in energy consumption. So, use shift when one part becomes less important and another part becomes more important. That is, when numbers of one side decrease and the numbers of the other side increase. Another word for shift is change. We see changes in the data in all graph, table, and map questions. And change is also a common word in task 1. For example, in this question, instead of replacing the word, we can change the structure. Here we have used the population changed. Then the phrase the population showed a change or experienced a change. The third way is to start with there were. Or we can use passive voice. Changes were observed or recorded. Then we have some synonyms of the word change, but understand their exact meaning and use them accordingly with care. Evolve means slow change over time. Here we have change in population over 200 years. So we can say the population distribution evolved over time. Transform means major overall change. We should use this only when there is a big change. For example, here we can say the demography of New York City transformed over 2 centuries. Alter usually means that someone caused the change. When population patterns change, it is an organic change. No one person is altering or changing things. So it is usually better to avoid this word in task 1. Next, percentage. Writing task 1 questions often include percentages. In these questions, the only word that can replace percentage directly is proportion. Here, the two sentences mean the same. Do not use the word ratio instead of percentage. It doesn't fit this context. We can use some other words for percentage, but for those we need to change the sentence structure. They cannot simply replace the word. One such word is share. Other ways are to use phrases like accounted for, made up, represented, constituted, and formed, or start with the percentage figure. And when we have percentages, we don't always need to repeat the exact number. Sometimes we can change the way we express the number. First, we have the majority and the minority. Majority means more than 50%, and minority means less than 50%. In some cases, we can also use majority for the highest percentage in the data and minority for the smallest share. In these tables, the figure for Manhattan was 76% in 1800, so we use majority, and 19% in 2000, so we use minority. Similarly, we use majority for the other districts for 2000. We can also describe percentages using fractions. 25% for a quarter, 50% is half, and 75% is three quarters. Here in 1800, the figure is 24%, so we can write about a quarter. In 2000, it is 81%, so we can say more than three quarters. So we don't always need the exact numbers. We can use words like about, nearly, more than, and less than. The best approach is to sometimes use the exact percentages and sometimes use these expressions. Next, let's look at big numbers. Many graphs and tables use large numbers, so we need to be comfortable with them. First, a quick reminder. We have ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, 100,000, and then a million. So, this is 100,000 and this is 1 million. In this table, instead of writing this long number, we can write around 19,000, and instead of this one, we can write around 6.5 million. This makes the writing shorter and clearer, and exact figures are not always necessary. When we write about numbers, we don't always need to be exact. So we use approximation words: approximately, about, around, and roughly. For example, instead of writing this long number 6471089, we say the population was approximately 6.5 million. We can also change the sentence structure and use the word approximate. For example, the approximate population was 6.5 million. We can also be more specific when we approximate numbers by using phrases like just below and just above. Use these when the numbers are closer to round numbers. This number is a little less than 80,000, so we can write just under 80,000. Similarly, this is just over 3.4 million. Approximation also helps us group data. In writing task 1, we need to report the main features and make comparisons. So grouping of data is important. For this, we can use phrases like in the range of and these other phrases. For example, to compare these two tables, we can write that in 1900, the population was in the range of 1.5 million and 1.9 million. There are more examples on screen that you can pause and understand. So, approximation helps us group numbers, which makes comparisons clearer. Next up, the word number. Graphs and tables have numbers. For this, we have to use the word number often. For example, here we would write that the number of residents was approximately 60,000. There is no perfect synonym for this word that works everywhere, so instead we usually change the sentence structure. So instead of writing the number of residents in Manhattan, We can change the sentence structure and write sentences like Manhattan's population stood at, or it had approximately these many inhabitants or residents. So we don't always need the word number, we use different types of sentences instead. Another very useful word is figure. Figure means a number from data. It simply means a number from the table or graph. It is one of the best words to avoid repetition in task 1. We often use it instead of repeating a long phrase. When we use the figure or this figure, it must refer to a number mentioned in the previous sentence. In this example, we have first mentioned the numbers for Manhattan. Then, instead of repeating, in 2000, other districts had these many residents, we write this figure for the other districts was. The word figure can also be used when we talk about changes in the same place over time. For example, the population of Manhattan was around 60,000 in 1800, and then instead of saying that the population of Manhattan increased to 1.8 million, we write the figure increased to 1.8 million by 1900. Keep some rules in mind about how to use the phrase this figure or the figure. We don't start a paragraph with this because it must always refer to something just mentioned. For example, this sentence, the figure rose over time. On its own, this sentence is incomplete. We need to mention in the previous sentence what the figure is. So here the population of other districts was about 18,000 in 1800. So when we say the figure rose over time, we are talking about the population of other districts. Another very important rule is that if more than one number appears in the previous sentence, don't use this figure. In this example, population of Manhattan is mentioned and then population of other districts is mentioned. So this figure is referring to which number? We don't know. This is confusing and wrong. There are slightly advanced ways of using it, but be careful if you use these. It should not be confusing and data should not be wrong or unclear. In the first example, we mentioned two figures in the first sentence. But then instead of this figure, we write both these figures. So we are conveying that both of the figures in the previous sentence increased. Similarly, in the second example, two figures are mentioned in the first sentence, but we use the word former. Former means we are talking about the first thing mentioned. So here, former refers to Manhattan. If instead of former we had used latter, it would have referred to the other districts. In the third example, we use the word respectively. Respectively means the numbers match the items in the same order. So the first number 2 million refers to the first thing Manhattan, and the second number 3.5 million refers to the second thing the other districts. But remember, we need to be careful with sentences like these. It is always better to write short, simple sentences that are clear rather than long sentences that may confuse the reader. Respectively is a very useful word in writing task 1. Respectively means one by one in order. So when we mention two things and then we mention two numbers, respectively tells us that the first number belongs to the first thing and the second number belongs to the second thing. A very simple example. If I say Ram and Sham are 30 and 25 years old respectively, it means Ram is 30 and Sham is 25. In these tables, in 1900, Manhattan had a population of about 1.8 million, and the other districts had a population of about 1.5 million. In this sentence, we first mention the two places and then the two numbers. Respectively means the first number is for the first place and the second number is for the second place. We also have the word respective. Respective has the same basic idea as respectively, but it is used in a different sentence structure. Respectively is used at the end of a sentence. Respective is used in the sentence before a noun. So the logic is the same. In the first example sentence, in 1800, the population of Manhattan was 60,000 and the population of other districts was 18,000. The second sentence says Manhattan had the highest population in 1900 and the other districts had their highest population in 2000. Former and latter are very useful words in both writing task 1 and task 2. Former means the first thing that is mentioned and latter means the second one. If I say, I called my sister and my brother, but the former was busy and didn't receive the call, it means my sister was busy. If in this sentence I write, the latter was busy, it means my brother. So former is the first, latter is the second. In this example, first we mention two places and their population figures. After that, we say the former dropped, which means the population of Manhattan dropped, while the latter increased, that is, the population of other districts increased. We can also use only one of them. That is what we have done in this example, where again we have mentioned two things, but in the next sentence we have only written about the other districts, which are the second thing that we mentioned, so we have used the latter. It is important to remember that former and latter work only when the sentence clearly mentions two things. Next, we need contrast vocabulary. In very simple words, these are different ways to say but. Some contrast words are inside one sentence. Other contrast words are used to start a new sentence. The meaning is the same, only the structure changes. Here are two example sentences. In the first sentence, we have used while, which is a same sentence contrast word. So we have not started a new sentence. In the second example, we are saying the same thing, but because we have used however, we start a new sentence. In our writings, sometimes we don't want contrast. We want to show that two things are similar. For this, we have words like similarly and likewise. In the first example, we are comparing that in both these tables, between 1800 and 1900, there is an increase. To convey that, we use similarly. In this second example, we are only referring to this first table. We are saying that the percentage dropped in these years and also the numbers dropped. We need exclusion or exception vocabulary when most numbers and values increase, but a few decrease. So use exception words only when one or a few parts behave differently from most of the things. To convey this, we have except, apart from, other than, and with the exception of. Here are a few example sentences. All of them are saying the same thing. Population everywhere increased except for between 1900 and 2000 for Manhattan. There is one more word you can use to convey exception, outlier. This is a more advanced word and you should use it carefully. It means one value or one case that behaves differently from the general pattern. So here we have used the word outlier to convey the same exception, that the only decline in population we see is in Manhattan between these 100 years. Let's talk about time and period vocabulary. Whenever years are given in the question, there are two simple ways to mention a time period: between and from to. When one single year is mentioned, instead of saying in 1900, we can also say in the year 1900. Both are fine. Sometimes we want to talk about a longer period of time. We can use phrases like over a period of 100 years or over a period of 100 years between this and this year. Don't overuse the longer phrases. Using them once in a task 1 answer is enough. In this question, we have 100-year periods. So we can use the word century. There are many different ways to use this word. Some of them are on your screen. You can use them to avoid repetition in your writing. A decade means 10 years. It can be used in the same way as century when the data is shown in 10-year periods. Now, words related to population. Questions about population are very common in writing task 1 academic. So we need a few words to avoid repeating population again and again. Before we move on, notice something important. The word population can be used in different ways in a sentence. In all of these examples, we're using the same word, but we have changed the structure. The word populace can be used instead of population. It broadly means the same thing. Don't overuse it. Once in a writing is enough. For example, the combined populace of the 4 districts increased steadily. Next, we have people, residents, and inhabitants. These words are used in very similar ways. These are many different sentence structures you can use for these words. You can start with phrases like more people or fewer people, or use phrases like accounted for and made up. We can also use words like inhabitants and residents in their verb form, that is, resided or inhabited. All of these give you many different words but also sentence structures that you can use to avoid repetition in your writing. Finally, an advanced word: demography. Demography doesn't refer to just population numbers. It is about how a population changes and is distributed. So we cannot use it to replace the word population. Use it when you're talking about the overall picture, not exact figures. Here are a couple of examples of how the word demography can be used when we're talking about changes in population patterns of a place. A common collocation of demography is demographic shift. So, if there is a change in population numbers and distribution, we can say that the city experienced a demographic shift. One easy rule to remember: use population for numbers, use demography for the overall picture. Finally, a couple of words from the question itself. Here, total means the entire population of New York City. In the introduction, the first sentence of the writing, it's best to keep the word total. But later we can use overall population or combined population. Another word in this writing is district. Again, it is better to keep the word as it is in the introduction of the writing, but later we can use words like area, region, and part. A few example sentences are on your screen. Now we start writing. We already have a clear plan and we have discussed vocabulary and sentence structures. But remember one important thing: you do not need to memorize a lot of synonyms and sentence structures. In the actual answer, you'll use only a few of the words we discussed. The key is to choose words and structures that you are confident with and that you know you won't make mistakes in. Clear and correct writing is always better than trying to show too much vocabulary. With that in mind, let's start writing the answer. This is our question. We begin with paraphrasing the question, which means writing the same idea in different words. On the screen, you can see this is the question, and these are different ways of paraphrasing. In the first paraphrase, I've changed the sentence structure. Instead of saying changes in population, I've written how the population changed. I've also used the word centuries and removed the names of the districts. In the second paraphrase, I haven't mentioned the three tables separately. I have simply said that the tables show population changes. Instead of total population, I've written overall and then just mentioned that it also mentions changes over the 5 districts. The third paraphrase uses more advanced vocabulary, demography. You'll also notice something important here. The tables include percentage data for the districts, but the question doesn't say this directly. But because the information is clearly shown in the tables, we are allowed to include it in the introduction. That's why in the third paraphrase, I have mentioned the proportion or percentage of residents living in the different districts. Remember, these are options, not rules. You don't need to write like the most advanced version to get a good band score. Choose a paraphrase style that feels natural, clear, and safe for you. Now let's move on to the overview. This is the overview that we figured out during the planning of the answer. The overview is a summary of the main trends. We don't mention details here and we usually avoid numbers. In this question, there are 3 key ideas we need to know. The total population increased, there was one drop in Manhattan, and the majority shifted from Manhattan to the other districts. Here are the 3 main points we need to cover in the overview, and these are 2 different ways to write it. In the first overview statement, the ideas are linked using although. It first mentions the overall increase and then the one decline. After that, the shift of where the residents lived is mentioned. In the second overview, the same ideas are written in a slightly different way. The sentence structure is changed. And the ideas are connected using with and at the same time. Both overviews say exactly the same thing. They are short, clear, and they don't include any details or numbers. You can use either style in the exam. The important thing is to show the main trends, not the details. After the overview, we move on to the body paragraphs where we explain the data in more detail. We start with the population numbers. On your screen, you can see the 3 tables, and this is the planning. So, first, we write about the total population numbers which come from this table. For this, we first mention the 1800 figure. In the next sentence, we mention that it increased a lot or increased substantially over the next 2 centuries. So we don't just write that the New York population in 1800 was this much, in 1900 was this much, and in 2000 was this much. We write the first one, we mention there's an increase, and we have used the word respectively. During the understanding and planning of the question, we talked about how the first table is different from the other 2. This is New York City as a whole, and these 2 are the districts of New York City. So once we have mentioned this, we can either write about Manhattan or about the other districts. It doesn't matter which one we write first. I have chosen to write about the other districts first. The reason I chose this was that there is an increase in the total population numbers, there is an increase in the other districts' numbers. Manhattan has a drop, so that I'll mention later. I start with the word similarly. The reason is that there is an increase here and there is also an increase here. So I start with similarly, there is an increase in this population overall as well. I use the word relatively. Relatively means in comparison. So, in comparison to all the numbers in the table, this number is very small. So, I have written that compared to everything else, this is a relatively low number, but then it increased over time. One important word I've used here is skyrocketed, which means increased a lot. Between 1900 and 2000, there is a major increase. We don't see this kind of increase anywhere else in the data. And instead of 2000, I have written the beginning of the 21st century. Now we mention the Manhattan population. Because the trend was the same for the total population and the other districts, we had started with the transition word similarly. Here we are starting with a contrast phrase, in contrast, because there is a difference in the trend. So we start with in contrast, Manhattan followed a different pattern. Then we write about this increase first and then the decrease. Coming back to our planning, we have written the overall, we have written the population numbers. This is the only part left, which refers to these two columns. We start with the phrase as for the percentage of the total population. This clearly tells the examiner that we are switching focus from numbers to percentages. We also say opposite trend here. That's important because we are referring to a contrast. This is where we are making the comparisons. In one table, the percentage is decreasing with time. In the other table, it is increasing with time. So that is the opposite trend. So after mentioning the comparison in the first sentence, we write about the percentage in Manhattan, how it changed over time. We have used the word plummeted. Between 1900 and 2000, there is a major drop. The contrast word we have used is conversely. It means the same as in contrast, which we have used in the previous paragraph. We have used phrases like accounted for and this figure, which we discussed in the vocabulary section of this video. To sum up, this is the original question. This is our plan. The final answer has 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph paraphrases the question and gives an overview, focusing on the main trends without details. The first body paragraph looks at population numbers, where we compare the total population, the other districts, and Manhattan using words like similarly and in contrast. The second body paragraph focuses on percentages, where we clearly show the opposite trend between Manhattan and the other 4 districts. Some useful vocabulary is highlighted here. But remember, this is not for memorizing. The goal is to learn how to plan logically, compare clearly, and use language accurately. There is no single correct answer in writing task 1. Before we sign off, let's quickly look at a few common mistakes. Very often, marks are lost not because of ideas but because of small things we don't notice while writing. First, notice the tense. All the years in the question are in the past, so all our verbs should also be in the past. For example, increased, was, skyrocketed, stood at, etc. Capital letters are important. The easiest way to avoid mistakes is to follow the capitalization in the question. In the question, you can see New York City is capitalized, Manhattan is capitalized. Use the same capital letters in your answer. Small words like the and a matter. In our writing, if we write about the New York City, we can use the city. If you write a city, it means any city, which is wrong in this context. So pay attention to these small words. Punctuation matters in writing. For example, when we use linking words like similarly and however, there is a comma after them. These are small details, but they affect clarity. So notice the full stops and commas when you are studying. Time expressions also need attention. So when you're using between and from to, make sure you're using full phrases and using them correctly. We talked about rounding numbers and not writing long numbers in our writings. So rounding is fine and using approximation vocabulary like around and approximately is great. But make sure you round correctly. Wrong rounding is worse than no rounding. It is important that the data and numbers that you mention in your writing are absolutely correct. Remember that task 1 is about main features and comparisons. Notice how we compared the total population, then other districts using similarly, and later using in contrast. That's what the task is really testing, how you compare the data and how you report the main features. And finally, vocabulary variety is important, but accuracy is more important. A simple word used correctly is always better than an advanced word used incorrectly. If you keep these points in mind and follow a clear plan, you're already doing most of what IELTS Writing Task 1 requires. Remember, writing task 1 does not have one fixed correct answer. Use these sample answers to learn how to analyze data and write clearly, not to memorize sample answers and vocabulary lists. That's it for now. I hope this helped you. All the very best.